Yeah, getting on. Oh, Lindy's not on yet.
Well, sometime around, I'm guessing 2000 even, I got hired at the River Road Bankies. And one of the people I met there was this lady in the garden shop. And all of a sudden I realized she knew what she was talking about. And we've been snarking each other ever since. I guess by now Carol qualifies as an old friend.
Young old, yes.
And anyway, she's had a truly, truly remarkable career in horticulture. Of course, I still remember the time she grabbed me for extra brawn to pick up a load of native azaleas for a job she was doing, and took me up to this wonderful nursery up near Longwood. And we got there and she asked one of the staff about a certain plant and they led her off one way. And one of the other staff said to me, "Did you know about the pity puppy bin?" So I emptied it.
Oh, that story. Oh, it still makes my blood boil. Go on.
Anyway, a very knowledgeable lady, a very educated lady. She's got the academic chops that a lot of us don't. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carol.
Thanks, Jim. But you
Anytime.
left off the punchline. Come on, finish the story. It's okay.
What punchline?
At the nursery.
At the nursery, what
Pity
did you
puppies.
grab?
Hmm?
What did you grab at the nursery in the pity pile?
Oh, the cladastris.
But it wasn't just any cladastris, was it?
No, it was Perkins pink, but how do we know? The label
It was pink.
You and I both said it's cladastris, but neither
You-
of us knew it was pink. You're welcome
Yeah.
to it if you come and dig it up.
No, it's probably as big as your house now.
Just about.
All right. By the way, I've got plastic pots for you, Dan. Don't listen to that.
Okay.
Because every time I say, "Hey, I've got plastic pots for you, Jim," Dan says, "Oh, no, not more." All right. Everybody can see my screen, hopefully.
Yes.
Yes.
We can.
Okay. By the way, this was a Four Seasons event mucho time ago. Where was that, Jim?
I have not the least idea.
That looks like Larry's place.
It was a cool place. But
Well,
anyway, so as Jim alluded to, I do have a master's degree in plant science and a bachelor's degree in plant science, and don't think it's all that hot stuff. It really, really isn't. I went back to school in 2006 because horticulturally I had hit a glass ceiling as far as my education goes. Back in the day, as you probably know, it's the dirt under your fingernails that got you the good job. Your resume looked good, you worked for people, you had a reputation. But in certain circles, particularly government and institutional, in the mid 2000s, your experience didn't count anymore. You had to have a degree. And I had never finished my bachelor's degree, wild child of the 60s. So I said, okay, I'll mortgage my house one more time, and went back to school, got a bachelor's degree in horticulture, was having so much fun that I said, oh, why not? I'll just indebt myself and my cats for the 7th generation and get a master's degree. But what was so cool is when you're in the industry and you're doing things that somebody taught you to do, and then you go back to school and you find out why they do that, or that the person that taught you really didn't know diddly squat. I mean, he or she told you do XYZ because Uncle Jim did it, Well, which is okay, but Uncle Jim's, his pool of subjects was small, and his environmental conditions might have been pretty considerable, and that's why he did something. So if Uncle Jim lived in Connecticut and I'm teaching somebody in Florida, you know there's going to be some problems. So horticulture has this tradition of doing things like they used to be done, okay? A tradition. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is, some you may know, some you may not know, basically what I call horticultural mythology. In other words, things that we do because somebody told us it should be done that way, but science goes, really? Think again. All right, so let's talk about soil amendments. Now, I urge you, first of all, if you're a retirement age, go back to school. It's a trip, you know, because nobody really cares what your grade point average is. By the way, I left those youngins in the dust. There's so much knowledge out there, and we've got some good community colleges if you don't want to trek all the way to College Park, which I did. But go back to school. Learning is just wonderful. So let's segue into soil amendments. So if you talk to a master gardener, and I'm not dissing the master gardeners in the audience, you're taught to, whatever is wrong with your plants, put compost on it. Whatever you think is wrong with your soil, put compost in it. Guess what? You can overdo it, and you can overdo it pretty fast. So let's take a look about what we want in a soil, okay? So soil is going to be about 45 mineral matter. That's that crunched up rock that actually the soil came from. And it's going to be 25% air and 25% water, give or take, depending on how saturated or how dry the soil is at any given moment. Okay, so you need the mineral matter, because that is what holds the matrix open and allows for what we call, and I just went out of my brain, don't get old, air holding capacity. So air holding capacity is something really important to your soil. The old time gardeners would call it good drainage. All right, good drainage. So from a fertility standpoint, in other words, providing nutrients, all right, we want no more than 5% organic material by weight or 10% by volume, which means that if you are creating raised beds or augmenting your soil, trying to alleviate compaction, you can really overdo the compost. So you get higher than 5% organic matter. I've got this cute little picture down here in the lower right-hand corner. This is kind of an up close and personal look at what you want your soil to be. You're going to have particles of sand, silt, and clay. So this is your mineral, the mineral portion in varying sizes, okay? And you don't want them all the same size, because then they'll close pack. So you have all these varied sizes. And then you're going to have some roots, and you're going to have some fungi, and you're going to have some little bits of organic matter. You're going to have some air spaces. You're going to have some beneficial bacteria, a whole bunch of beneficial bacteria, a whole bunch of beneficial microbes, a whole bunch of beneficial fungi. Soil is at best a very living, complicated ecosystem. And every soil course that I've taken where we talk about the soil microecology just makes me go, oh boy, what we should know about our soil and how we mistreat our soil. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to start with a soil test. Duh. Don't do it. Do not use a home test. They're really poopy. They're crap. You want to take your soil sample, and there's plenty of websites that offer how you make a soil sample. We're going to make a composite sample. You don't want to take your sample in the top like 4 inches, because you've impacted that. You really want to dig down deeper and get actually what is going on before you messed with it. I like to get a standard soil test, which is going to give you, phosphorus, potash, calcium, magnesium, zinc, boron, a bunch of other guys like that. They're going to give you percent organic matter. That's important. And that's why you want the deeper part, not the top part, which could be all old leaves or something. That's not going to tell you the story that you want. Your percent organic matter, and another cool thing called a cation exchange capacity. A CEC gives you kind of a function of how well the nutrients that you put in there, whether you do a compost, whether they're naturally occurring, they come in a little tub and they make blue water. Without a high CEC, cation exchange capacity, those nutrients are not plant available. Plants do not suck up molecules. They need atoms. Okay, they need separate elements. All right. The other thing I like to get in my soil test is what is called a textural analysis. This is going to give me my percent sand, silt, and clay. How many times does somebody say, oh, I've got clay? All right, first of all, clay is extremely nutrient rich. And I doubt that that person really has nothing but clay. They have what plagues all of us is compacted soil. All right. So relieving compaction is, for most people, going to be one of their big goals. So it's not clay generally, although, hey, old Potomac riverbed, yeah, it's pretty gnarly. But most of us are going to have a blend of sand, silt, and clay. Okay. So when you actually mix in organic amendments like composts, you only want to add that which will correct a deficiency based on your soil test. All right. And you want to make sure that that organic matter really does not get any higher than about 5%. Okay. I know that's probably pretty radical, but don't leave me yet, because we're still going to add more organic matter. We're just not going to mess with the soil matrix to do it. Okay. Matrix is what soils, and our potting soil does it too, within a very short period of time after our putting them in the pot, or are stirring up our vegetable garden if you're still tilling, or some other soil prep. All right, it settles down into this matrix, which hopefully you've got enough mineral soil that it holds that air holding capacity. Your organic matter is going to add your moisture retention. So a good soil is going to give you air holding capacity and moisture retention in the balance that you want to provide for whatever plant that you're planting. All right, I hope that was not too confusing. All right, when you're making a garden bed, in most conditions, most situations, you do not want to incorporate organic amendments. Now, if your soil is very, very compacted, we're going to talk a different story. But generally, you do not want to do a lot of organic amendments. What you want to is you want to put a good 3 inches of a quality organic mulch on top. Stay away from dyed mulches. They frequently, the origin of the wood is pallets, and we don't know where those pallets have been. Generally, they're used pallets, and that means you're talking chemical residues. Yeah, okay, don't do that. All right, so some people, usually when I'm talking to a garden group, at this point they're going, what? Don't we need an excess of nutrients to make the plants grow? No, you don't, all right? Because high levels of nutrients can go the other way. Now we can have nutrient toxicity. Like one of the things that Maryland soils generally have a lot of is aluminum. So let's say you've got hydrangeas and they're pink. Ew, and you wanted blue. All right, so you're going to go to Home Depot and you're going to buy that bag with a hydrangea on the front. And you're going to say, oh, this is what I want. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. Because Home Depot buys from suppliers that sell uniformly all over the nation. So a lot of times what's in that little bag with the hydrangea on the front is aluminum sulfate. We do not want that because we already have aluminum and you can get aluminum toxicity. You want iron sulfate for our soils in our region. Okay, so the other thing that I want to bring up is most people are taught, oh my God, I've got to fertilize my plants, and we're going to call it feed. I'm going to feed my plants. Plants don't eat, and nutrients aren't food. Okay. So what you need to know is you bought that little packet of blue powder or whatever you're doing, is that any nutrients that are not immediately utilized by the plant or by their microbe associates go right through the soil profile, and that is non-point source pollution. Right now, we, me, you, me, all of us, are the biggest source of non-point source pollution in the Bay. It's not the farmers, it's not the chicken people, it's not industry, it is you and me, baby, and it's overuse of fertilizer. So more is not better, and you want to think of your soil in a holistic fashion of this is the whole like village of microorganisms, all supported by this matrix. All right, so enough of that. So what about bone meal? So it's bulb season. We're thinking about our bulbs are starting to go to sleep, and the tradition has, well, we're going to add bone meal. So do we really? Okay, so I mentioned non-point source pollution in the Bay. So we know that nitrogen is our #1 pollutant, but guess what? Phosphorus is our #2. And guess what's really prevalent in compost? You got it, phosphorus. All right. So that's another reason to think, wait a minute, maybe I don't need all the compost in the world. All right. So bone meal is another source of phosphorus, which we probably don't need, and calcium, which generally most soil samples that I read in Central Maryland don't need. The Panhandle does not need. We've got calcium coming out our ears. So you need to know that phosphorus does not stimulate plant growth, although the marketing would just love to have you put more phosphorus on there, saying, oh, it stimulates plant growth. No, it really doesn't. Okay. It is not a plant growth regulator, but be careful about marketing. Because, oh my goodness, when it comes to horticultural products, ooh, they're going to say that the moon is made of cream cheese and expect you to understand that it does. Okay, so we know that phosphorus does move through the soil profile. #2 pollutant in the Chesapeake Bay. You're killing my crabs. I will not stand for that. All right. So we also know that we need all of that soil microecology, which includes the mycorrhizal fungi. And high levels of phosphorus, are going to wipe out our mycorrhizal fungi. Okay. Plants and mycorrhizal fungi and other beneficial microorganisms co-evolved for the last like couple of millennia. You really think that we're going to turn around nature in just the last 150 years? I don't think so. Okay. So without that mycorrhizal association, which 85% of all the plants that you know has, all right, then plants have to reallocate their resources into root growth instead of like bolstering their immune system, putting on those pretty flowers that you want. So they're going to shift resources. So the bottom line is get a soil test, find out what you need. And yes, for a simple bribe, I can actually help you read your soil test results. All right. What about coffee grounds? Yeah. Oh, they're the poster child. So you don't want any more than about 10 to 20% of total compost volume. Okay. Over 30%, you start going down the other side, guys. It's detrimental. So really, one of the things that you hear is that coffee grounds can kind of suppress some diseases. Okay. Again, go back to no more than 20% by volume. All right. And what you want to do if you're actually actively making compost is you want a diversity of microorganisms, which means that you want a diversity of materials going into your compost. Okay. And they're not that great at acidifying the compost. All right. It takes a long time to shift pH. Eggshells. Well, what else are you going to do with them? If you've got chickens, you feed them back to the chickens. So basically, even if you pulverize them, it's going to take 10 years before they release the calcium. And most Maryland soils have plenty of calcium. So, this may be something that is going to be a problem for you. All right. Or let's say, don't spend too much time on it because it's not really benefiting you that much. And again, I go back. take a soil sample, see what your calcium levels are. And I find that it's a nice little bit of information that archaeologists have found eggshells intact after thousands of years. Yeah. Now, however, everybody gets nervous about blossom end rot in tomatoes, and it's described in most literature, some literature, as a calcium magnesium imbalance. All right. But really, it's much more complicated than that. We typically see blossom end rot in early tomatoes because the root mass has not developed enough to be able to support the plant material that it's pushing forth and the fruit, and we get this degradation of the blossom end. So bottom line is, grow tomato plants with really good roots. Don't put them out too early. If the soil is cold, I don't care what the air temperature is, if the soil is too cold for this tropical plant, it's just going to sit there and wish it had little long johns on, okay? So I know everybody wants the first tomato, but you might end up with more blossom end rot. Okay, so let's talk about mulching. It's one of my favorite subjects. I get arborist wood chip mulch from a local tree company. Some batches are better than others. I know this arborist, so I'm not picking McDonald's pods or styrofoam cups out of it. And sometimes it's a little bit more leafy. It depends on what he has picked up that day. I like arborist wood chip mulch much better than the bagged stuff. For one thing, bagged hardwood mulch can vary widely in its pH. I was working at a high-end neighborhood quite some years back, and one particular area where the landscapers, it was one of those areas where everybody had to use the same landscaper. One particular area, all of their ericaceous plants were getting so yellow, and mulching had been done like 2 or 3 weeks beforehand in the spring. So I kind of went out and I said, wow, this is pretty uniform across many species. And I think the wood chip mulch, or the store-bought shredded hardwood, is the problem. I did some pH testing and the pH was 8. All of those ericaceous plants were just going because the pH was suddenly rising too fast, and they were getting chlorotic, iron chlorosis, because of a batch of mulch that was not pH balanced. So be careful of bagged mulches. Don't go for the dyed ones. Seriously, folks, you don't want that next to your plants. That's why I stick with arborist wood chips. Now, I'm lucky. I've got enough land. I can have the guy back up his truck, dump it out, and then I can let it sit there, percolate until I'm ready to mulch with it. But arborist wood chip mulch retains the moisture. Of course, it moderates the temperature at the root zone, which is what we want. Great weed control. I like the fact that it's sustainable, okay? If you're down county, the arborists there have got to truck their wood chip mulch up county to a farmer who will take it. So, are we burning that carbon footprint a lot? So if you can utilize wood chip mulch and get it dropped locally when you're down county, it's a better way of doing it. And frequently it's free. Okay. So there's a lot of again, mythology surrounding arborist wood chip mulch. People think that it's going to acidify the soil. No. They say that they fear that it's going to negatively impact their plants because of allelopathy. So allelopathy is when particularly black walnuts put out this is my land, not your land, plant hormones or plant chemicals, and they discourage certain plants from growing within their root zone. Lots of plants do it. Some interesting invasive species do it very, very well. So no, you really don't get that problem with arborist wood chip mulch. It is not a fire hazard. It just does not burn well. If you want something that burns really well, go to a rubber mulch. Rubber mulches burn like crazy mad. It does not tie up nitrogen. It will not attract termites, carpenter ants, or other wood dwelling pests because those guys need solid wood. This loose chips is not what they want to house in. All right, so all of those, don't worry about it, okay? So I will say at this point, why don't I take a couple of questions on what I just talked about?
Thank you, Carol. There was one in the question, but you one item in the chat, but you had answered that. I do see that Carol Edwards has a question. Carol, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Okay, my question is for those of us with puny city gardens and limited strength that can only handle bagged mulch, what do you recommend?
Do you know how old I am? You don't. My mother was mulching her own garden when she was 94. So to answer your question, you divide and conquer. You can go down to, I don't know what area you're in, but you can go to
Capitol Hill.
Okay, you're in Capitol Hill. You might have
Yes.
to stretch out a little bit, but I know Greenbelt, College Park, Tacoma Park have places where you can go and get a tub of wood chip mulch, just something that you can handle, a 5-gallon bucket. Okay, so you can get it in small quantities. I am up county. I can get 10 cubic yards. I get 10 cubic yards about every year and a half. You don't have that, and I understand that. But there are places where you can get a couple of 5-gallon buckets of it and use it where you need it. It's just a better mulch than bagged mulch.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let me go on and
Carol,
talk about.
Carol, I have a question. My soil test always comes back saying that I'm low in boron. What is the best source to deal with boron? And do I really need to be worrying about it?
Nah, are you seeing boron deficiency in any of your plants?
No,
Which,
I just
by the
get it in my
way-
soil test.
Which, by the way, is really, really difficult to distinguish from, I want to say, oh, is it magnesium deficiency? Anyway, it's, you get a little discolored leaves. If you've got a reasonably high OM, organic matter, percent organic matter in your soil, don't worry, those microbes are going to fill in the gaps, okay? Don't worry about boron. Although that is really peculiar. I don't think I've seen much boron, low boron. Most soil tests that I see are like skyrocket high in almost everything. So that's interesting. Now you're gonna tickle my brain. I'm gonna have to look that up and figure out. Yeah, boron. What is it used for? It's a micronutrient. So it's one little tiny molecule in this whole long chain of metabolic processes.
Hey,
Pivotal.
Carol, I seem to recall that boron affects apples, or the lack of boron affects apples. I don't remember where I heard it or what, but I seem to recall that apple crack, just like a blossom end rot.
Yeah,
Boron thing.
you could be right. We do see boron deficiencies, but it's usually in greenhouse production of annuals. And that's where we see boron deficiency, and it's discolored leaves. You know, it's just shows that the resources aren't being allocated uniformly. But that's interesting. I'll have to look that up because my boss is a pomologist, so I can ask him. All right, let me forge ahead and talk about, the so ever popular, let's put down cardboard or newspaper, and then we'll put mulch on it. Why do we want to do that? You really don't, okay? So any kind of barrier, all right, cardboard, newspaper, please, dear God, do not use landscape fabric, do not use landscape fabric, do not use landscape fabric, all right? They prevent air and water movement in getting into the soil. Without that movement of air and water, those wonderful soil microbes die, okay? And remember, they are symbiotic with your plants so that they're facilitating water and nutrient uptake with your plants. So you want good, healthy soil microbes. So nothing that is going to stop that movement of air and water. Now, If you go into a garden center or Home Depot or Lowe's, you're going to see printed boldly on that landscape fabric, oh, does not inhibit air and water movement. Meh. All right, marketing, no science to uphold that. And I can tell you right now, it really does prohibit air and water movement. And again, we're going for that living soil. All right. Also, little known fact, cardboard frequently can contain chemical adhesives, but the anti-skid coatings that most cardboard boxes have on them are things that you probably don't want in your garden. So there's that. And also, remember the termite thing? They do like cardboard. We don't want that. So generally when I'm doing soil prep, particularly on lawn, I'll scalp it with a weed eater, string trimmer, scalp it low, put on 4 to 6 inches of my wood chip mulch, and my grass is dead as a doornail. Now, what will come up through that are going to be those weeds that we really love to hate, that have really good underground storage like thistle. Thistle. If you've got a big old gnarly root mass of honeysuckle, it's going to have enough reserves to push through. Ivy, ditto, ditto. Pachysandra, ditto. They have enough underground storage that they're able to put a shoot up through there. So on perennial weeds, you're not going to be as effective, but on grass and annual weeds, it'll be pretty good. Just scalp it low and mulch it high. All right. Oh, landscape fabric. Isn't that beautiful? No, that's ugly. All right. So I've already said I included that with cardboard and newspaper. It prevents air and water movement into the soil, starves your microbes. And I have been on job sites like this, peeled up that landscape fabric, and that soil is dead as a doornail. It's Sahara dry. There's no organic matter in it. And I'm wondering how that poor plant is even living. So the other thing that happens with landscape fabric is that we put mulch on top of it because, hey, it's ugly, right? Well, weed seeds generally blow, all right? Your annual weed seeds blow into your garden, which means that they germinate on top of the mulch, and then they get the roots through that mulch, and then they make a big mess, okay? So landscape fabric, generally not a good idea. Rubber mulch. All right, so rubber mulch is sometimes recommended for like playgrounds, but it used to be recommended for playgrounds. Now, not so much. Most rubber mulch is high in zinc. That's something that we don't want to associate with a lot. It is very flammable. So yeah, there's a lot of contaminants, environmental contaminants in it. And frankly, it's not effective as organic mulch in controlling weeds. And part of the deedly-do with organic mulch is those soil microbes, they're going to start breaking down that organic matter and start to incorporate it into that. It's called an A layer, okay? O layer, A layer. And then B is when you get into soil that looks like it needs organic matter. All right, and those are the different soil profiles. So you've got your microbes and they're busy breaking down that mulch and incorporating it into the soil for you. So if you're putting rubber mulch on, or if you're using that cardboard, you're not going to get that wonderful breakdown of your organic mulch and getting it into the soil. It is not a permanent, rubber mulch is not a permanent mulch. There are microbes out there that decompose it. So anyway, not a good idea. Not a good idea. Okay. So here's another myth that I find is hysterical, that, okay, it's hot, it's sunny, your plants are like, oh God, please water. All right. And somebody says, oh, don't water them in the middle of the day because they'll sunburn. Really, people? Did you ever take physics? Probably not. So we know that wet foliage just is not going to sunburn. Assuming that the plant is not newly planted, it's been hardened off. This is not the first time that it sees sunshine, okay? So what you want to do is, it goes back to soil and conditions. So look at your site conditions. Your site analysis is probably the most important thing that you'll ever do with your area. It's what do you really have? All right. How much sun do you really have? What is your soil test telling you? So you want to right plant, right place, okay? And try to prevent drought, again, by looking at your soil and creating that nice, rich, living soil. And then mulch to keep the root area cool and to retain water. Water likes to do this evapotranspiration thing right off the soil. So by mulching, you kind of alleviate some of that loss of moisture. So the bottom line is, if your plant is showing drought stress, please, for heaven's sakes, water it. All right. And a note here, when you want to water deeply and thoroughly. I know I see a lot of people talking on their cell phones when they come home from work, and they're holding the hose and they're doing one of these swishy things. They're getting the foliage wet, but are they really getting enough water to the roots to sustain the plant through the next 95-degree day? So think about how you water. Okay. Optimally, if we really want to do it, early morning is good, because then it's going to be available for the plant as it kicks in its metabolic processes as the day warms up. Kind of makes sense. It's like eating a good breakfast, right? The more water that you throw into the air, the more you move through wind and by evaporation. So get up that extra hour early. Don't stone me, please. And water your plants before you go to work. All right. And then check on them when you come home. In our hot, humid conditions, sometimes water standing on the leaves overnight can kind of foster some fungi. Actually, believe it or not powdery mildew, but some of the other anthracnose and other fungal pathogens just love our high humidity, wet leaves. Yeah, and they'll go for it. One other thing that you want to do, and this goes back to just exactly how much fertilizer do you really need? Fertilizer is a mineral salt. Salts damage roots. So overdoing fertilizers and some pesticides are going to decrease your root mass, increase your total dissolved salts in your soil mass, and that's going to create a condition where your plants are going to be more drought stressed when we do have those dry conditions, hot, dry conditions. Okay. So if you're planting in containers, and even though I've got a bunch of in-ground stuff, I do like containers because, like right now, my bleeding heart looks great, but it's going to die down in July. So I'm going to have a container planted that's going to go in that spot in July. It's on a main walkway, so it's a focal point, and boom. So I do a lot of planting in containers because I like to move them around. So there's this wonderful product called Soil Moist. It's a type of hydrogel, and it's touted. Yeah, it's that marketing stuff again, guys, to improve soil retention, or improve water retention in soils. Okay, so let's talk a little science here. So the water in the gel isn't plant available. So, meh, okay. And in presence of certain elements in our potting soils, like peat moss and pine bark, they lose, the hydrogel loses the ability to hold and release water in just a couple of weeks. Fertilizer can totally negate it. So is it worth the money? No. Save your money, go buy another plant. I can talk the journal articles and the experiments that were done on Soil Moist and the hydrogels and why it even came into the market, but you don't want to hear it. It's pretty dry. Okay. How many people still put something in the bottom of their pots to improve drainage? Do you know that we have known since 1959 that that's fallacious, that it doesn't improve drainage at all? Okay. So anytime you change your layers of substrate, it retards water movement through the soil mass. All right. And what it does is, you can kind of tell from the pictures that they had a clear plexiglass box of a soil substrate, and they had an Erlenmeyer flask upside down with a rubber stopper in there, and it released a certain amount of water at a certain interval. And you can see where it's dark is where the water has penetrated the soil. But this soil box contains two different soil types. One is a silt loam and the other is sand. Hey, you'd think that sand, it would run right through the sand. But look at it. It actually spreads horizontally and it creates kind of like a meniscus before it finally breaks through. So layering your soils, not a good idea. Those shards in the bottom don't do a bit of good. So you can stop doing that now. All right. So everybody likes to do it quick and easy. And there's a lot of product out there in the marketplace that says, oh, you know, just foliar feed. Yeah, you know, it's quicker and it's more wonderful, and it's bullshit. Oh, did I say that word? I sure did. Now, there has been some science worked on this, and we have found that a few plants can absorb some nutrients into their leaves through the stomata under certain environmental conditions. What happens though is it does not circulate throughout the plant. It's actually kind of bound into a certain area in the leaf. So although some plants in some circumstances can absorb nutrients, it's not really an efficient use of your time and materials. The lack of movement of those micronutrients kind of like makes it. And really what happens is when you spray the leaves, the water carrying the nutrients runs down the stem and it goes into the roots. You can do it that way if you want to, or you can just put the fertilizer, you know, like a fish fertilizer directly on the roots. Okay. The other reality about this application technique is that if you really were supplying a large percentage of your nutrients, all right, say your soil conditions are poor or whatever, any fertilizer that was actually going to be effective would burn the heck out of your leaves because of the salt concentration. So if you like to do foliar feeding, carry on, but understand that you're not maybe getting where you want to go. Oh, and I love this one. I love this one. You know, I imagine you all go on Facebook now and again, and you probably belong to a couple of plant groups, right? Yeah. I'm just amazed at the lack of knowledge, basic the lack of basic knowledge by most people. It's very, very scary. So I know that Uncle Joe probably said, oh, your plant's not doing well, I'll put some Epsom salts on it. And I kind of go, why? All right. Epsom salts contain magnesium. Now, magnesium is one of those micronutrients that that plants actually utilize. But did you do a soil test? Does your soil, is it deficient in magnesium? So you need to check your soil. Do you need magnesium? Are your plants showing magnesium deficiency? Back it up with a soil test, because magnesium moves rapidly through the soil profile and can pollute the bay. And again, don't kill my crabs. All right. This is the one, I'm an ISA certified arborist. And I love it when these companies come around, the big ones, I won't name any names. And the first thing they say is, oh, yeah, your tree is blah, 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 blah. Let's do some deep root feeding. We'll put that fertilizer right down into the roots where the plant can utilize it. Guess what? It's all BS. All right. So most tree roots are in the top 8 to 10 inches of the soil. Because remember, I was talking about that air and moisture thing. It happens in the top 8 to 10 inches. So if you're any self-respecting root and you want to metabolize, so with metabolism, there is air exchange, gas exchange. You want to be up where the air is, right? Okay. Another good reason not to use that landscape fabric. Okay. So deep root feeding is going to take it like they take it 18 inches, because we're going to get down there where the roots are. They bypass the roots. If you need to fertilize one of your trees, and please do it on the recommendation of an independent arborist, not someone with a sales goal at the end of the month, then all you have to do is just broadcast it. It'll get there, water it in, you're fine. You're probably much better off putting a nice organic mulch on those roots and stop whanging them with the lawnmower. Tree will like that. Okay, so let's carry on with the trunk injected nutrients. So that's a lovely thing, or the deep root feeding. So sometimes our tree leaves turn yellow, or we get some foliar drop, and that is not an indication of soil nutrient levels. I'm sorry, guys. It's frequently an indicator of disease, and you need a diagnosis. Okay, so again, I go back to before you initiate a soil, any kind of fertilizer program, do a soil test and find out what's there and what isn't there. And again, tree roots go well beyond the drip line. So you really want to mulch. Yeah, you really want to mulch. Okay. If you think, if you're really convinced, okay, that your tree needs a fertilizer program, well, have a leaf tissue analysis done, because plants actually are pretty cool. If we take the leaves, the terminal leaves, we dry them, we send them off to have a nutrient analysis. All right, so nutrients are sucked up by the roots, up the stem and out the leaves, and that's where they park themselves. So if you do this leaf tissue analysis, we know exactly what that plant is actually taking up, regardless of what's happening with the soil, what's actually happening with the plant. It's not that expensive. Most of our farmers in the state of Maryland actually fertilize their blueberry crop. We're talking, thousands and thousands of acres of blueberry by doing a leaf tissue analysis. They take some, random leaf samples. We see what the weather and what the soil conditions are, and actually the variety of the blueberry, how that's being impacted. And then they fertilize just what they need to meet the goal. All right, so leaf tissue analysis, kind of a fun thing. All right, so fertilizer is not food. It's not going to cure nutritional deficiencies caused by disease, pests. Air pollution is now becoming a really big thing if you're down county. If your tree starts looking a little ratty, air pollution might be part of the problem. We get mineral toxicities, runoff. Oh my gosh, runoff off of our streets, our roads, salt that's used for icing, which we didn't have much of this year. Of course, drought, poor root health, and poor soil health. And what I see in a lot of mature trees, particularly in the city and down county, is they have simply outgrown the spot they were planted in, and they have more roots than there is soil available. So that's another thing that I see a lot of. So fertilizer is not medicine. It doesn't fix these problems. Oh, trunk injection is actually where you take like a really big hypodermic needle and you drive it into the cambium layer. That's where all the vascular system is. And you drip in a chemical. Maybe it's it's used to ward off Dutch elm disease. It's been used, insecticides have been used to try to prevent emerald ash borer from taking out a specimen ash. So that's typically how we use trunk injection, not necessarily through nutrients. Okay, because why do we not do it? It's harmful. You're wounding that bark, you're wounding that cambium layer. And plants don't heal like human beings do. They take a long time, and then they just compartmentalize the wound. They don't actually heal it over. And I've already talked about soil injection, no more effective at delivering fertilizer than broadcast application, and is therefore not cost effective because it'll cost you buku bucks. So don't do it. Okay. Isn't that pretty? No. All right. Turf. Around here in the mid-Atlantic states, we typically grow turf type tall fescue. Turf type tall fescue has roots that grow to 2 to 3 feet. Turf type tall fescue has roots that grow to 2 to 3 feet deep. Where did I tell you those tree roots were? The top 8 to 10 inches. Are we talking competition? Yes. So trees grown in a lawn, particularly if it's a lawn that's routinely maintained by a company, they're putting lime down too frequently. They're using fertilizer. They're utilizing all kinds of chemicals in that. We call it a critical root zone of the tree, and that's negatively impacting the tree. And people wonder why they wake up one day and they say, wow, the tree's got a lot of dead limbs. What's going on? It's what you did 5 to 8 years ago. Trees move through time very, very slowly. So I get called in to look at trees that are in poor condition after construction, or after, oh, they had to dig up the front yard to put in a new sewer system, and then the trees start dying about 3 to 5 years later. Yeah, it's because of the damage to the root mass. So there's a little cute little picture down there in the lower left-hand corner that actually, that's really what tree roots look like. All right, it is not a reflection of the canopy. Okay, it's more like a big peppermint patty, and it actually goes beyond the drip line where it can. You city dwellers, me too, I work every day writing tree protection plans in the district. I look at a lot of urban trees for babies. All right, any questions on that?
So
Should I
Carol,
look-
there are several questions in the chat. Let me just go back a couple. When you said to use compost and you said it should be 5%, what does that look like in terms of depth? A half inch, 1 inch?
So remember when I talked about, I started with, how do you take a soil test? And typically I take a spade, all right, and I stomp on it for the full depth of the spade. So that's like 8 inches, all right. I rack it back to make a divot, and I take my soil sample from 6 to 8 inches deep. So that's going to be where your roots grow. You don't want your roots to be in the top 2 inches. That's really going to set them up for drought stress. You want the roots to grow to the depth that is normal for that plant, okay? And again, it's going to look more like a peppermint patty going deeper depending on which plant you're talking about, okay? So you want your soil percent organic matter to be at that 6 to 8 inch deep.
Okay. The other question that I've actually put this one in is when you talked about using a string trimmer to remove grass instead of like the lasagna method, do you worry about plastics in the soil from a string trimmer, like PFAS, PFOS, and so forth from those string trimmers?
No. Should I? I don't know yet. There's not been enough science done about, you know, do string trimmers, how much microplastics are we getting in the soil from string trimmers when microplastics are contaminating our every bit of our life? So no, I don't. Because again, remember, Olivia, you're going to string trim once in your life. Once.
We know those lawn companies come out and string trim every time they mow the lawn.
Well, to stop doing that.
Yeah, I don't, but I know that I watch them and I know that they do that.
Yeah.
Doug,
And
Reimel?
I've not looked that up, but now you've put that bug in my ear. I'm just going to see if anybody's done a study on, oh God, no, not another thing.
I think somebody must have, because they are selling biodegradable string trimmers that are very expensive, but the string is biodegradable. So somebody must have done a study. But you can
No,
look that up.
somebody probably found a fool is born every minute. But I'll look for a study.
All right, there's a challenge for you. Doug
Yes, it is.
Reimel asked last year when he was researching how to evacuate a groundhog out of a burrow, and there were many humorous responses to that. But he did read that he should use Epsom salts. He didn't do that method, but do Epsom salts work to evacuate groundhogs?
And not that I know of. And remember, so you've got groundhog damage, you've got Epsom salt damage, because remember there's salts, and salts burn roots and they retard root growth, and they're going to retard plant growth. So do you really want to put a whole chock-a-block of Epsom salts down a groundhog hole? You know what I found works really well?
Actually, Carol, it will make groundhogs evacuate if they eat it.
You're
because-
bad. You're very, very bad. You are terribly bad. Let me tell you what I do, okay? I have cats. Cats produce these nice little Tootsie Rolls. You put that down the groundhog hole and they are out of there, man.
Ew.
Cat poo. Oh, come on. It's deep. It's organic matter. Why not? Certainly less hazardous than diarrhea in groundhogs. You're bad.
And Lauren Rubenstein has a question. Lauren, can you please unmute and ask your question about the Japanese black pine? And Lauren, maybe have
Yeah.
Here we go.
Sorry, it took me a second. So we have had needle pest diagnosed. The black pine is probably 40 to 50 years old. Centerpiece of our garden. We're told that for life, we have to spend $900 a year, 3 treatments per season, each time requiring moving the fish so they don't get poisoned. And I kind of know what the answer is, but I kind of need like all of you to tell me that it's time for the tree to go. It's just really, really hard to say goodbye.
Oh, Lauren, my heart bleeds for you because yeah, so first of all, you can spray your own fungicide and that'll cut down some of that $900 right there. All right, because a battery powered sprayer that gets to about 25 feet is a pretty easy thing to buy. You will have to cover the pond, move the fish, because most fungicides are kind of like a negative impact on aquatic life. So the thing of it is that I can see doing it yourself. There are ways that you could cover the pond for the time that you are spraying and after the spray has dried. So that's having covered many a pond. I know, well, it depends on how big it is. If it's like, 40 feet by 50 feet, no, I think but if it's a small pond, I would think about spraying and find out more about the life cycle of your needle cast fungus. I don't have it off the top of my head. Don't go by what a tree company tells you because they want to make money off of you. All right. So I'll try to put a little note and talk to my cohorts at University of Maryland Extension on needle cast fungus spray. So, if that black pine is the center part of your garden, it becomes, like how much work are you willing to do?
Right. Right.
Because
But do you think that's an example of a tree just outgrowing its space?
that could be, I can't see it.
Yeah.
And it depends on how far the root line goes.
Uh-huh.
And again, I can't see it. So
Right.
all I can do is
Right.
say, yeah, needle cast has been diagnosed. How severe is it? How much defoliation are you getting? It might be when you started noticing, it might have been to the point of like, I don't want to say no return, but not real good return if it already negatively impacted the look. I mean, if it lost all of its interior needles, then do you want to keep it or do you need to redesign that part of the garden?
No, it's still beautiful. We caught it last year and it's still a gorgeous tree.
Cover the pond, buy yourself a sprayer, and there are battery powered sprayers that give enough pressure that you can get some altitude.
Mhm.
And I'll get back to you, Lauren.
Thank you.
about, oh, no problem. The information is maybe more readily available to me
Mhm.
than it is to the homeowner. So let me see what I can find out about it. I just made myself a note.
Awesome, Carol.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Let's keep going.
All right, planting. All right, I'm going to rock your world. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I had a mother who would say, Carol Diane, you be careful with those plant roots. You know, when she used the middle name, you know it. So mythology that roots are fragile. You shouldn't disturb the root ball when planting or transplanting trees and shrubs. All right, no, not necessarily. So the industry has presented us with a lot of container grown woody plants that are pot bound. They are pushed with fertilizers to give you that beautiful plant that you're going to say, I got to have that. All right. But then you open it up and you've got a Brillo pad of tightly packed roots. And what are you going to do about it? Most people, in fact, I saw this on Facebook last night. Oh, gross. They dug a hole exactly in the shape of that like 2-gallon pot. And they took the plant out and they stuck it in. Do you want to do that? No. Oh my God, that's the worst thing you could do. And how many people do that? Don't fess up. All right. So container grown woody plants come to us with major root issues that we have to face if we want that plant to acclimate rapidly and actually grow to potential. So we also know that because they're grown in a plastic pot, the medium is structurally very different than our home soil. And you're going to get soggy, dry areas, soggy/or dry areas, because that texture is so different from the mother soil to that medium that's in the pot. It's usually a wood chip base. It's very airy. It's free draining because it's in a plastic pot. Okay, so this is typically what you get. All right, see that picture on the left. All right, so woody plants need corrective pruning before they are planted. All right. And what I do, and I've been doing now for quite a few years, is I do bare root planting. And I will do bare root planting on just about anything, any time of the year that the ground is not frozen. Oh my God, Carol, you don't. I do. Because if I buy, and I also learned right after the derecho, and my property was basically devastated. I lost many trees. And I was kind of frantic. So I went to Benke's. I was working at Benke's then, and I bought several trees that had been sitting on the yard for a year or more. And they were like 75% off end of season. Don't do that. All right. Because you're going to get a lot of root problems. Whether they're containerized or B&B, you're going to get root problems. Okay, so what do? Basically, we remove the root. By the way, that is one of the trees that I bought. All right. And you can see you've got major roots fused. Not a good idea. So bare rooting is very, very successful as a transplanting technique because you can start to cut open those fused roots. You can prevent girdling roots. I see mature trees dying, doing sectional dieback because of girdling roots that could have been cured right there when it was planted. Okay. And you observe some rules, like a cloudy day is really great. You don't want your subject tree or shrub to be drought stressed going into it. But you should know that if you do open up that root mass, you're going to get a very healthy new root system that's going to establish it. So that tree got opened up and you can see those roots. Now those are bamboo stakes because those roots were like this and they did not want to be opened up. They fought me. So I had to stake them in until I started backfilling. This tree is huge now. Is huge now. It never looked back. All right. Enough on that. That's enough. That's enough wild child for you. And I will take questions.
Carol, we had paused well along the way to answer questions, so I don't see any new ones in the chat. I did put a couple of soil science resources in the chat simply because I also went to the University of Maryland and got my master's in soil science, but but if anyone has any questions now, please unmute yourself and use this wonderful opportunity to ask Carol questions.
Lauren, yes, wood chips are the best mulch. It's what I've been using. Oh, sounds like Ray Weil. I have stories about Ray Weil. Attended his class as an adult, and every time I had a question, he took it as an assault on his ego. And it got to the point where the techs, you know, there are technicians that, because you're in lab, the tech said, Carol, if you have a question, just ask me. Because he would get all like, "Rah." And I'm like, I just want to know. But anyway, he has an ego. Yes. Any questions, guys? No? Okay. Then I guess we're done if nobody's got questions. Nobody was like, oh my God, you really do that to woody plants, Carol? Yes, she does. And I can show you the journal articles that support it. So it's
Well,
science supported.
My question I still have about boron. Why do I have a boron deficiency? And, you know, what is the deal with string trimmers? Why do we have all these plastics in the, you know, from the string trimmers? Is it a problem or not? So I hope to hear back from you on those two questions.
String trimmer plastic. All right. And boron deficiency.
And I have spent my career working for the health of the Bay, so I really appreciate you bringing that into tonight's talk. So thank you.
Don't you mess with my crabs.
I'm all for the entire ecosystem. So thank you so much. We have recorded this, so we will post it to the Four Seasons Garden Club website. Thanks to Pat Shea and his work on that. And I really appreciate your taking the time to share all of this fantastic information with us.
All right. Well, thank you guys for inviting me, and have a good evening, I guess.
Yeah, you too, Carol. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.